back to another episode of the Sports Podcast, brought to you by the CollingsThodeNetwork. I'm your host, Chris Collings, joined by
Nolan Thode.
as per usual. Now, this week, first thing we want to talk about is two big retirements happening in the hockey world.
Mm-hmm. Two former Norris Trophy winners in Big Z, Zdeno Chara, and, entertaining as always, PK Subban. So,
Leaf killer.
just going off of career stats, 1,680 games played for Zdeno Chara in the NHL, 209 goals, 471 assists, 680 points, and a whopping 2,085 penalty minutes. Stanley Cup champion in 2011, where he was the captain of the Boston Bruins. Won the Norris Trophy in 2009, and the tallest player in NHL history. So, just, quick question. When you think of Zdeno Chara, what do you immediately, what comes to mind?
Oh, just Boston and just how tough and physical they were. He kind of always just set the precedent for those teams. Him, guys like Lucic. And you could never touch Lucic or Marchand because of Chara. I know that as a Leafs fan. He's not the guy that would get under your skin, but he's the guy that protects the guy that gets under your skin.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. He was the captain for a reason. He kind of just, was the bodyguard for the team, and you really don't realize the size of him until, I remember I went and saw in Buffalo. I saw the Sabres versus the Bruins, and I think he was standing next to Tyler Ennis, and he just looked.
That's a great
giant.
comparison.
He looked giant, and he was much more than that physical presence. He, just was a stout defensive defenseman, and was able to play into his mid 40s because he still had value to an NHL roster. Just being able to make the smart play and having that length and size is something that you can't find super easily in the National Hockey League, especially one at a Hall of Fame caliber.
Yeah, and I've never met the man myself, but to be captain for 10 plus years and to be in the league for almost 20 years, never hearing anything about his personal life ever, he had to have been a good guy. So, cheers to a great career, Zdeno Chara, even though he played for the Bruins.
Yeah.
That hurt me.
Even as a Leafs fan, you can respect the career.
One of the most notable players of all time,
No,
whether
for sure.
whether it be his size or his success.
And just a small thing to mention, a kid in my elementary school class growing up from Egyptian descent, so, wasn't very familiar with hockey, but for whatever reason, one of the names that he knew was Zdeno Chara. So, definitely an icon. And speaking of icons, not only for the game of hockey, but just, everything that sports is, and sports and inclusion and diversity, I think PK Subban is much. He's defined way more than what his career on the ice
He'll go
entails.
down as one of the most important athletes, maybe ever, just because what he's done for his sport.
No, I absolutely agree. And just going over his career stats briefly, he played 834 games in the NHL, 115 goals. 352 assists, 467 points, 905 penalty minutes. So, PK could get a little rough here or there. Didn't win the Stanley Cup, but did make an appearance in the Stanley Cup Finals in 2017 when his Nashville Predators unfortunately lost to the Pittsburgh Penguins.
We're robbed.
And just like Chara winning the Norris in 2009, in 2013, PK Subban was the NHL's best defenseman, which, he took advantage of his prime, because in other years, he wouldn't be touching the Norris Trophy race.
No, not with his style of play.
But, he's just someone that he cares so much about the game of hockey, and he being, of African descent himself, he realized the importance in growing the game for, minorities and making it accessible to those who maybe wouldn't grow up dreaming of playing in the NHL. He's trying to be that person on the screen that little boys and girls across the nation can look up to and say, if he can do it, why can't I? And one of the greatest personalities too. He's going to have a long career in broadcasting, I believe, afterwards. Oh. He's going to be in the booth. He's going to be sharing his input, and he does it in such a style that's just unmatched by anyone. The energy that he brings and the positivity that he oozes is just never seen anybody like PK.
Yeah, it's one of the things I'm most excited about is just what he'll bring to the broadcast booth. Just hockey needs characters now more than ever just to stay mainstream and popular, and I think he's going to be the guy to do it, or at least I hope so. to rival other sports like the NBA and NFL, which is currently going on. But yeah, two incredible defensemen calling a career. One of the best defensive defensemen of our generation and one of the best offensive defensemen of our generation. So we're losing two big members of the hockey community.
Absolutely, and two players you're just accustomed to seeing on your screen. So it's going to be a different NHL without them in it.
Yeah, you don't say. Now, a little bit of preseason going on, but nothing too notable happening quite yet. Sadly, John Tavares is going to be out for 3 weeks, but we could see him by the start of the season for us Leafs fans.
Yeah, and, it's an exciting time for sports fans. NFL's, now going into week 4, so, storylines and stuff like that, more existent, just, the more games we get. And now, within the next, 2 weeks, the NHL is going to be, in full swing, and within a month, the NBA as well. So I think everybody's looking forward to the next month of sports, and, not to mention MLB playoffs as well.
Yeah. But until then, right now, all we really have to talk about is football. But luckily, weeks 2 and 3 gave us plenty to talk about. The first thing I just want to mention real quick is that I'm hoping Trey Lance will be able to recover because, wow, that looked scary. That and then the Mac Jones injury. Thank God he didn't break anything. But, wow, both two scary-looking foot injuries. Never want to see that.
Mm-hmm. And the thing with Trey Lance is that a big part of his game is the rushing aspect of his game. He's not really known to have to rely on his arm too much, and we're gonna see how he comes back from this ankle injury if it really affects him. And you hate to see it because what could have been such a promising career in the NFL, he might struggle with this and fail to get back to the promising state that he was going into this season. And in week 2, such an early injury, and it really kind of changes things for the 49ers. Luckily, their starter of last year, Jimmy Garoppolo, the guy who took them to the NFC Championship, he stepped in that game against the Seattle Seahawks and took care of business. Didn't look as good in week 3, but I think Jimmy G, in terms of a backup, is one of the better ones in the NFL.
Yeah, luckily avoided trading him somehow. I guess no one wanted him, but somehow those things kind of work out. We'll see how Jimmy G continues to play going forward, but I'd expect him to keep the 49ers right there in playoff relevance. I mean, he brought them to the Super Bowl a few seasons ago. With that defense, they're still great, but losing Trent Williams, that's going to be huge for them. They're trying to avoid surgery, apparently, but it does not look good right now. So, again, two scary injuries for the 49ers, as well as losing out on Mitchell there, so we'll see how they battle through that injuries, but right now the 49ers would be a team to watch right now if you want a underdog story related to injuries.
Mm-hmm. And, things maybe look bleak for them. However, they've always kind of, even if things don't look good at the start of the season, I feel like consistency over, all 18 weeks is something that the 49ers show, and their defense is still incredible, so rooting for them to not be, impacted negatively too much by the injuries.
Yeah, speaking of injuries, Tua, what is happening there? So, from the videos that I saw, it immediately looked like a concussion. Getting up off the ground, stumbling around. I've seen that in hockey, you see that in football all the time, and that's usually a very clear sign that he needs to stop playing. But he kept going, and then in the post-game interviews, we heard a lot about back injuries and other areas of the body that aren't his head. So, and of course the Dolphins being in another scandal, not too surprising, but again, hoping Tua's okay first and foremost. But what is going on in Miami?
Mm-hmm. They want to keep their starting quarterback, the guy who's led them to be 3-0, and now with a short week, now they're playing Thursday night against Cincinnati soon, and he's questionable, and who knows if he'll play.
Yeah, but even through the injury, they still got the win over the Bills, which, I mean, I didn't see coming. I don't think many people did.
Yeah, despite the butt punt at the end of the game.
It'll go down as an all-timer. We got a butt fumble, now we have our butt punt. I guess they just didn't realize how close to the end zone they were, but yeah, that is so crazy. What a weird way. And then apparently Josh Allen's getting grabbed in his you-know-what in the middle of a pile. It's just, what a weird and wild game that was.
Yeah, and the Bills dealing with a lot of injuries as well. I think coming away from it, road game, very hot conditions, you could see on that final drive how much it was affecting them. To only lose by 2 points, I think, maybe there's a minor victory to be had. However, Now we have official word Micah Hyde is out for the season. And Bills fans, it's all too familiar, losing a Pro Bowl guy in the secondary. Last year we lost Trey White. This year it's Micah Hyde. And how are we going to be able to bounce back? We did sign Xavier Rhodes, who's former Pro Bowler, but struggled in the more recent seasons where he's played. But he's a playmaker, and I feel like the rest of the defense is going to be able to support him enough that signing is absolutely necessary for a guy like Hyde going down. And although he's not the safety position, I think we can shuffle things around in the secondary. And the Bills, despite the loss the previous week, I think still are one of the top teams in the NFL, and to not be taken lightly. And last year they lost to the Jaguars. You're gonna have losses like this, and this one came to a 3-0 team, Miami Dolphins. So not anything against the Dolphins, they're an amazing team, but I think the Bills, these types of losses in the regular season, are I can live with them, just because I believe we will be in the playoffs at the end of the day, and it's just these lessons that we can learn as a group and collectively come together and be prepared for a deep playoff run by the season's end.
Yeah, I think one of the main takeaways that you can get from this game is that the Bills, when they do lose, it's a close game. And then when they do win, they win by a lot, as we saw against Tennessee in week 2. A crazy, just ass-whooping.
Obliteration. Speaking of that, with close games and ass-whoopings, I think, could be wrong on the statistic, but I think the last 7 games the Bills have lost have been by 1 possession, and the last 20 games the Bills have won have been by double digits.
It's some ridiculous numbers.
So apparently the way to beat the Bills is to keep the game close. However, I don't think that those streaks will be kept too long.
Very unsustainable numbers. No, other things that happened. Speaking of the Titans, they did go on to bounce back from that huge loss, and they beat the Raiders. I more so want to talk about the Raiders now 0-3, especially after revamping that offense with the addition of Devontae Adams. It's just, what's happening? I have no answer.
Yeah, I think in week 1, they were just outmatched by the Chargers, never really were in that game too much. And then week 2, they had pretty much the game in their hands and kind of blew it to the Cardinals. The Cardinals with a big comeback, with a big last-second touchdown, Kyler Murray with a little bit of magic, and then a defensive touchdown in overtime to win it.
After 2 fumbles, Cardinals forced 2 fumbles in that overtime. They grabbed the second one.
Yeah, great game for the Cardinals, but they're still, I believe they're 1-2. Yeah, they've just been Cliff Kingsbury has come out and said that they want better starts to their games, because they won in week 2, they had to come back in the second half, and they weren't able to do that in week 3 against the Rams, because when you're playing a defense like the Rams and they go up, it's going to be hard to make that comeback. So I think the Cardinals are focused on having better starts to the game. Obviously, they're missing guys like DeAndre Hopkins, Rondell Moore, I still believe is out, and then just less of an identity in terms of the run game. James Conner hasn't been as great as he was last year, and they did lose Chase Edmonds to the Dolphins in the offseason. So I think the Cardinals are a team that's definitely a bounce back candidate. A team that made the playoffs last year that is not looking too good through 3 weeks.
Yeah, I guess I'd say within the next 4 weeks, I'd be able to confidently place where the Cardinals are going to finish. I'm hoping personally that they do bounce back. I like seeing guys like Kyler Murray actually play for something. He is super talented still. I mean, of course, 20 seconds on one play, that's stuff that you remember. So I'm hoping that they are able to make a little push and be a competitive team. Speaking of uncompetitive teams, my Panthers finally won a game. It's over the Saints, who might have lost Mike Thomas and Jarvis Landry, opening up a huge Chris Olave game. But Panthers finally pulled through. They got a game. Baker wins his first game in Carolina. CMC goes for 100 yards total. Just finally things are looking to click for Carolina, which didn't in weeks 1 and 2 until the ends of the games. Excuse the sirens.
Yeah, so you talk about the Panthers getting their first win. I think that's good for them. The Saints, though, looking at 1 and 2, I think they've impressed, but 2 divisional losses now to the Buccaneers and to the Panthers. Jameis now potentially injured. Andy Dalton was taking first-team snaps in practice today. So, we'll see how that offense. I think they should probably lean on Alvin Kamara a little bit more. I haven't really seen too much from him. Obviously, he didn't play in week 2. He was hurt. But, when you have a guy like that on your team, you have to kind of design plays for him and allow, more space to open up. And he just hasn't really been as impressive as we'd like to see through 3 weeks.
Yeah, he hasn't really been the Alvin Kamara that we even know from prior seasons. So that's another guy I think will have a massive bounce back throughout the season based off what he's doing right now. But yeah, just an incredible game for Chris Olave. He's really starting to put himself in the same conversation as guys like, as other rookies like Drake London and, Garrett Wilson.
Wilson. Yep.
He's now joining them in over 100 receiving yards in games, getting proper targets, getting a lot of receptions per game. So it's looking really excited for our rookie wide receivers.
Yeah, it's a great class, and they've all been, not just making big plays, but having consistently good games, games where, they're being targeted frequently and, making impacts on their rosters. And, with a guy like Drake London, he's been, the number 1 target for the Falcons offense. So, stepping in, he was the first receiver off the board in the draft, but, he's been that guy for sure. And not to mention in the Thursday night game, an amazing catch by George Pickens, another rookie wide receiver. He's, very exciting, and he can make a play like that. I would like to see a little more like consistency, games where he can have 6 to 10 receptions, but definitely a highlight reel play. Odell-esque. Obviously it wasn't a touchdown, but crazy athleticism, and it looks like nothing but bright futures for this rookie wide receiver class.
Yeah, another guy to mention is just a guy like Romeo Doubs, who is pegged to be the number 1 wide receiver for that team, and quickly earning Aaron Rodgers' trust in that game. Who did they play? The Buccaneers. Quickly earned his trust, and then didn't. And we'll see through week 4 if he's going to look back or not. I don't think he will. I think he's going to continue to stay hot. It's another name to add to this Rookie of the Year race.
Mm-hmm. But that was a big win for the Packers, as they bounced back last week against the Bears, but it's the Bears. Only so much that offense can do. Their defense had a great game. Justin Fields was pretty lackluster, but beating the Buccaneers, I think, is a big win, especially on the road. But Tampa has been dealing with injuries. Mike Evans was suspended following, week 2. There was a bit of a
brouhaha,
bit of a scuffle. Mike Evans and Marshawn Lattimore, we know they don't have the best history. And we talk about Zdeno Chara protecting his players. When you see a guy like Tom Brady, getting spoken to, getting touched, any teammate on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you're going to want to, step in and protect your guy.
Yeah, Mike Evans, if I had to choose one wide receiver to protect me in a fight, he's up there. He's a scary-looking dude, and he's gone to bat for his teammates multiple times now. We've seen it in multiple seasons now. So, but yeah, a 14-12 win, just squeaked it out at the end by stopping the 2-point conversion. Mm-hmm. How many chances did the Buccaneers get at the end of that fourth? It felt like they got a million chances to score on that last drive, and the Packers just kept stopping them until the Gage touchdown there. So just like an incredible effort at the end of the game by the Packers D, and then they got rewarded for it in the win by stopping that 2-point conversion.
Yeah, big penalty on the first attempt of the 2-point conversion, a false start, sent them back 5 yards. Some people like a little bit of extra space when you're near the end zone. Only so much you can do drawing up plays from the 2-yard line, so maybe it was a blessing in disguise, if they were able to get that 2-point conversion off, but they ultimately weren't, and the Packers walk away with the win.
Yeah, sadly, though, the Brady versus Rodgers matchup, slightly disappointed, both QBs not having their greatest games. A lot of our QB matchups this week were disappointments, whether or not that was because of the quarterback's fault or not, but like Tua getting injured in the Tua versus Allen matchup, and then Brady versus Rodgers, just not something that, I was looking forward to seeing, even though going in I was pretty excited about it. But at least Lamar Jackson continues to prove why he is the front runner for MVP and is really cementing himself as could be the top quarterback in the league this season. So far, he is.
No, he's been incredible in 2 straight games with 100 rushing yards. He's just it's so hard to prepare against him. Obviously, you can think to just, prevent him from moving with his legs and you've got him. But, he's able to work with his arm as well. And, his weapons have been stepping up this season. Mark Andrews and Rashad Bateman, the obvious ones. But guys like Devin Duvernay have been, making their impact. And a win over the Patriots. J.K. Dobbins finally back, so encouraging for Ravens fans after, missing all of last season. But I think Lamar betting on himself and, rejecting the, original proposal from the Ravens seems to be like a good investment so far. He's looking for a big payday and, like you said, the MVP frontrunner. Another quarterback matchup that disappointed, not because it wasn't good on either of their ends. They were both disappointing. One of them was actually amazing, but it wasn't a close game, and that was Jacksonville versus the Chargers, Justin Herbert versus Trevor Lawrence. And when you put those two teams together and, a 38-10 result, you'd probably think it's the Chargers on the winning end of that. But no, the 2-1 Jacksonville Jaguars, who are coming off of a 24-0 win over the Colts in week 2. And, a close game to the Commanders in week 1. They could honestly be, 3-0 at this point. The Jaguars and Doug Peterson have been looking, very exciting, and it's the best start for the Jaguars since the Blake Bortles Saxonville era of the team.
2017. Yeah, what a crazy start for the Jags. Like, I don't want to say Cinderella story, but just it's too early for that. But just one of the most surprising stories of the start of the season. So exciting, and it is really, really good to see Trevor Lawrence take that next step. After tying last season for the most interceptions with Matt Stafford, him throwing for 3 touchdowns and no interceptions against the Chargers blew me away. I was not expecting that at all, being, I think, the 3rd or 4th highest scoring fantasy quarterback of all week 3.
Yeah, and Trevor Lawrence, he's a perfect example of why, sports fans are so quick to react, and I hate it because last year Jacksonville had an abysmal year, and they didn't have the most amazing roster in the league, but people were calling after one season Trevor Lawrence a bust, and now after 3 games, he's got a 6-1 touchdown to interception ratio, completion percentage of 69.4, and a 103.1 passer rating. So Trevor Lawrence shutting up all the haters, and I just love to see it because, talent like that, you hate to see it go to waste. And maybe last year people were, pessimistic.
I know people were afraid that the Jaguars were going to ruin his career, which I think was crazy to jump on that bandwagon early. As someone who likes the Jags personally and has really enjoyed what they did last offseason, especially adding a lot of young defenders, it's like I'm blown away that people thought they'd be ruining his career by now, when this season they're first in their division.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, credit goes to Doug Peterson. He's been, my coach of the year so far, taking a team that, nobody would have expected to be, one of the better teams in the AFC as of now. They're, leading their division, and, the way that the Colts, Titans, and Texans are looking, Jacksonville could, be that team out of the AFC South. And
it's
could crazy
be a division winner.
Last year, I think a big part of why they were so dysfunctional was the coaching situation with Urban Meyer and all that going on. But, a former Super Bowl winning coach in Doug Peterson, he's kind of, brought what he values into this team, and he seems to be, the right guy for the Jaguars.
Yeah, maybe they could build a winning culture. And then, as you said earlier, 2 straight wins, both big, dominant wins, and could have beat the Commanders, who fell this week in a just sad game to the Eagles. Isn't that the former coach now? So, just disappointing for the Commanders after that improbable week 1, and then Carson Wentz looking really good.
Losing to his former team. I think that's the first game. I'm not sure. The Eagles might have played the Colts last season. I don't know for sure, but yeah, the former Eagle losing to his former team. I think the defense sacked Carson Wentz 9 times in the game.
It was something crazy.
Could be wrong. That seems like a lot, but the Eagles 3-0, and everything seems to be clicking. Jalen Hurts, I remember the second he was drafted, and it was kind of, I think he went in the second round in the 2020 draft, and people weren't really expecting him to be a second round quarterback. And he was still behind Wentz at that point in time, so a lot of people were kind of confused about the decision. They thought, they still had their quarterback, but, Eagles fans are laughing now with Jalen Hurts, and, I think they finally have an identity on offense, and it's maybe lean on the run when you need to, but
Yeah,
Jalen Hurts has been incredible with his arm, and bringing in a guy like A.J. Brown has, really allowed him, and, Devonta Smith taking a step forward in year 2 has just, made this Eagles team, scary and a threat to come out of the NFC for sure.
Well, it's like you say, they finally are building that identity, as everyone knows that the Eagles were a run-heavy team, and they have been for years now, but Carson Wentz might not have been the quarterback for a run-heavy led team. So this season, bringing in Jalen Hurts, who I've been incredibly high on, had him as a MVP favorite, I think he is the reason why this Eagles team has found that, because he can run it when they need to, and he can throw it when they need to, and he's just kind of been that guy for them. He's been him. And especially, like you said, A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith finally taking that step up to Devonta Smith in this last week. But it's just, that Eagles team looks dangerous. Those receivers, that pass threat just opens up the running game. So crazy good team. Commanders, Wentz starting to cool off. I think everyone's starting to see their true colors. Mm-hmm. I think Terry McLaurin and Dotson are just, I feel bad for them. They're just kind of been stuck there, especially Terry. I think he needs to find a new team with a real quarterback that will be competing.
Yeah, and we could see Sam Howell playing this season, the UNC product. Who knows?
Dual threat QB, good with the arms, good with the legs, a lot like Jalen Hurts.
Mm-hmm. But going back to the Chargers-Jaguars game, forgot to mention, it wasn't a great game altogether for the Chargers, but I think, worse than the loss coming out of it is losing Joey Bosa. And I'm not sure Joey Bosa, I think he's on IR now, so slated to miss at least the next 4 games. And Rashawn Slater, who's, their stud second-year offensive tackle. I think now that Herbert, who already gets pressured enough as is, losing a big guy like that, and, he's going to struggle, and there's going to be pressure, and, maybe that defense without the pressure of Joey Bosa is going to give up too many points. They gave up 38 to the Jaguars, Who's to say that, if they play the Bills in the playoffs, doesn't look good for the Chargers. So
yeah, hoping he's back by the playoffs, but I see exactly what you mean. In these next few weeks, we could see this Chargers team very quickly fall out of this playoff race in that tight AFC West.
Yeah, the other teams in the AFC West, the Broncos squeak out with a 11-10
ping-pong
interesting score. Yeah, so an 11-10 win over the 49ers. Somehow they're 2-0.
2-1.
2-1. Somehow they're 2-1.
After their first week loss to the Seahawks, they've come out and won 2 straight weeks.
Yeah. They could be 3-0 too. They'd be the worst 3-0 team of all time. I think they need to figure it out more on offense, because it hasn't been working with Russell Wilson so far, and I think a lot of fans are surprised. I think maybe they're trying to do a little too much. Luckily, they're 2-1 right now. They're not having to play catch up in the AFC East. They are tied for the division lead, but we just need to see more from the Broncos this week. Who do they have? They have the Raiders. So the 0-3 Raiders, I think.
Very winnable game. It's a division matchup.
Very winnable game for each team, though. Just the way they've both played, and then the last team in that AFC East is the Chiefs, who somehow were upset by the Indianapolis Colts.
Colts coming off...
Matt Ryan getting his first win as a Colt.
And the Colts coming off being shut out by the Jags, win 20-17.
And it makes you think, if the Jaguars can beat the Colts 24-0 and the Colts can beat the Chiefs, are the Jaguars better than the Chiefs? I'd like to see that matchup head-to-head, little Mahomes versus T-Law. But yeah, so the Colts, they get their first win, and they get their first win. So do the Falcons. The Raiders are the only 0-3 team. The only other team without a win is the Texans, but they tied the Colts in week 1. So by a technicality, they're not undefeated.
Yeah, which I don't think you really want to be grouped in with the Texans anyways.
Yeah. So. Texans kind of knew coming into the season what it was going to be, It's another learning year. They've got new guys coming in on defense, new guys coming in on offense. This is definitely not their year. So for them to not have a win, whatever. But for the Raiders, there was expectations for that team.
This was meant to be not their year, but it could have been, based off what that defense and that offense looked like on paper.
Exactly. who beat the Texans was the Bears, and looking at the Bears, I think them and the Broncos are in competition for the worst 2-1 team in the league. How do the Bears have a winning record?
That is the rain game, and now it looks like they're going to be playing another rain game. It is just... We've seen maybe two of the worst 2-1 teams. I mean, that might be getting ahead of myself because a lot of teams can't go 2-1, but I know that the Broncos are bottom 5 in at least 4 offensive categories, and have the Broncos put up 20 points in a game yet?
The Broncos put up,
because I know they put up 7. They put up either 17.
They haven't.
Yeah, so and this is the first place team, and then the Bears didn't put up 20 points in week 1, and then just weird. And then another 2-1 team, the Giants, also playing weird football, but it's working out. Saquon's healthy again, and that's really fun to see. But losing to Cooper Rush, who's now 0-2 as a starter, and 2-0, my apologies. And
looks like that might be it for him.
Yeah,
Dak projected to come back in. If Dak has a bad game, though, you got to ask the question, do you play Rush the next game?
Well, I know that Jerry Jones went on a few radio shows and said there could be competition in the quarterback room, which got a good laugh out of one of the analysts sitting on the panel on NFL Today. But the Cowboys have a 70%, their odds are 70% to make the playoffs, and especially with Dak coming back, I think as soon as Dak's back, he's going to ride it out the rest of the season. I think Jerry Jones is being funny.
Yeah,
that makes no sense to me.
3 teams with a winning record in the NFC East. The Eagles at 3-0, and then both Cowboys and Giants at 2-1. It's always fun to just look at the early season standings. Bears are a playoff team right now. Jaguars, which isn't as crazy, but if you told me before the season started that they're a playoff team, I probably wouldn't have believed you. Dolphins and Eagles as the respective 1 seeds.
And our last 2 undefeated teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, somehow in week 3, there's only 2 teams that haven't lost, or going into week 4, there's only 2 teams that haven't lost a game. Usually, there's a graphic that the NFL posts on their social media.
And they're doing it this year.
Every week that highlights the remaining undefeated teams. And usually, in week 6, there's still a few teams left, but, with the Dolphins playing Cincinnati, if they don't have Tua, I could definitely see Cincinnati and Burrow getting that win, and the Eagles playing Jacksonville. That is a very interesting game for week 4.
If I had to ask you the question, assuming both teams are healthy, who lasts the longest undefeated?
I would say the Eagles.
I'd agree.
Just because I don't know. I just believe in this Eagles team.
I love their offense so much. And we didn't even mention Dallas Goedert, who is just consistent. He's a good tight end in the league, and everyone knows it. Mm-hmm. They're my favorite. But, wow, this Dolphins team is exciting.
Yeah, and, not even looking at the record of them at 3-0, I think when you look at, other favorites like the Rams, Buccaneers, and the Packers in that NFC, there's been a lot of dysfunction in the early season. The Rams offense hasn't been incredible. They had a close game against the Falcons. And then, Tampa Bay, although they're dealing with lots of injury on the offensive side, Mike Evans being out for a game, Godwin hasn't really been out there, Julio Jones hasn't really been out there. And then the Packers, still finding their identity. I think the Eagles have to be the favorite to come out of the NFC as of now. And
they're my favorite, at least.
Yeah, which for the first time since they beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl a few years ago. But, I feel like the NFL is better when the Eagles are good. I just like,
You like seeing a good Philly team?
I just like seeing a good Philly team. And with the Cowboys winning the division last year, I guess they're 2-1. They're right there in the race. But, it looks like just the way that the Eagles have been, that we're not going to get a repeat NFC East champion again, as the Cowboys were the division winners last year.
Yeah, and just thinking about all those NFC teams that you mentioned and thinking about the divisions they're in, Packers and the NFC North, who knows who's going to be the division leader coming out of that one. I had the Vikings pegged to be in that spot, but with 2 quiet games from Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins losing in Monday Night Football again, he's got to have double-digit losses by now in Monday Night Football. It is crazy.
I think he's like
And the Lions...
2-12 or something.
Yeah, 2-12. Yeah, it's crazy to think about. Just playing on Monday makes you that bad. I mean, I don't blame him. I hate Mondays too, but for some reason, the Lions have been one of the most impressive teams in that entire division, which is crazy to me, but I mean, a team that doesn't quit ever. They're fun to watch. Put up 35 against the Eagles, and then didn't they just barely lose this week against the Vikings? It's just what a crazy good season that they're on the run, like they're having, even though they're only a 1-2 team, or are they 1-2 team, not 0-3, but Swift being hurt, that definitely doesn't help them. But Jamal Williams steps up huge in week 2.
Mm-hmm. And he's been, a solid guy. He was with the Packers a few years ago and kind of was that 1A, 1B with Aaron Jones like we see now with Jones and Dillon. But yeah, I think he's primed to take over as the lead back, in the absence of Swift. If you don't have him already on your fantasy team, or if he's not picked up, I think he's the guy that you got to look to take on the waiver wire this year. And they play Seattle, so that's not a great run D. I think Jamal Williams could be primed for, a career-defining game, potentially. And, I think him and Swift in Detroit, I love that two-headed back. They both provide different things, but similar things. I think, Jamal Williams is maybe your third down, or maybe your short yardage guy, your, first and goal on the one kind of guy, whereas Swift can take more passing responsibility. But that doesn't mean that Jamal Williams can't step into that role when Swift is absent.
Yeah, continue talking about Minnesota and Detroit. I actually had this as my game of the week. If you had to go back and rewatch any of the games, I would definitely pick this one, as the Lions went up really early in this one, 24-14, but gave up 14 unanswered fourth quarter points, which it just seems like it's becoming... there's always something with this Lions team. They either make a dramatic comeback and don't get it, or they blow a lead. Especially a field goal attempts from 54 yards out that Jared Goff now regrets letting happen in the first place, which I think is one of the most exciting stories coming out of that. Is what is Jared Goff going to look like for the rest of the season? Me personally, I'm really excited, and I think he could turn a lot of heads this year in his second year with Dan Campbell, but especially working with Amon-Ra St. Brown, who actually broke a streak in that game of 8 receptions in consecutive games. He ties Antonio Brown and someone else for the most consecutive games to do that. Mm-hmm. But he still finished huge in that game. He had six catches for 73 yards, didn't come up with a touchdown either, which was another streak that was broken, as he was just scoring like he was on fire, which I don't remember the exact streak, but it was something about him being held scoreless. That hasn't happened for a while now. But a big guy that came up in his spot, though, where he's not getting 8 receptions, was Josh Reynolds, the secondary wide receiver on that team. 6 receptions, too, but he came up with 96 yards, and again, no touchdown. Maybe they need to find the touchdown more through the air. I'm not sure what it is for the Lions, but blowing a lead like that to the Vikings, especially Kirk Cousins, in the fourth quarter, he went 9 for 12 for 125 yards and 2 touchdowns. You can't let that happen if you're the Lions, which, I mean, an incredible performance. But, man, it's tough. As someone who roots for the Lions kind of out of pity, that's a tough one to watch.
Yeah, the Vikings get their revenge, though, from last season, where the Lions had like a last-second kind of touchdown that, really hurt the Vikings' chances to make the playoffs. I think they were 5-6 during that game, and then the difference between being 6-6 and 5-7 late season is pretty big. For my game of the week, I went with the 49. I'm kidding, not the 11-10 game. A weird kind of matchup, but I'd probably say that one that I was surprisingly entertained by was the Falcons and the Seahawks. It was a 4-point game. Turnovers happened, lots of stuff happening, and it was just entertaining throughout. I think the Seahawks have been more fun this season to watch than they were the past, few years.
Geno Smith definitely helping that. What an incredible story as well.
Yeah, he's enjoying himself as the starter there. I think, they need a little. I think they need to figure out what they're going to do with their running back situation. I would love to see Kenneth Walker be used more and more efficiently. And then speaking of running backs in that game, obviously I don't think the Falcons want to be using Patterson as much as they did in that game, but it was working. So Cordero Patterson was just, let off the leash and had a crazy game.
17 carries, 141 yards, and a touchdown with the W. The Saints, again, playing in one of the more entertaining games. Their game against Carolina was heavily entertaining for me personally. Their game against now the Falcons. And then that first week matchup was just... Falcons have been entertaining this year. It's surprising.
Yeah, and I think, with
the Saints.
Yeah, another division team. But yeah, the Falcons, were able to get that first win of the season. They had the game against the Saints. They came close against the Rams, and then, obviously beating up on a Seahawks team where, I feel like the win is up for grabs. But I think, again, with the Falcons, it's not a playoff year. That's not what they're looking for. But I think just promise out of, the young guys of their group, like Drake London, AJ Terrell on defense. But
especially Kyle Pitts.
I'd like to see maybe more from Kyle Pitts. I'm not sure exactly.
He did have a good game, but again, not finding the end zone, which is not good for your tight ends.
Yeah, being in his second year, he was the 4th overall pick in 2021, and he has never caught a touchdown in North America. He had one during the London game last year, where I remember Curtis and I watching from his garage early in the morning. We woke up, and for whatever reason, that was the week I traded for him in fantasy football, so I was happy about that performance. Next week, we actually do have a London game with the Vikings and Saints playing. So that'll be a fun one. I think maybe Vikings-Saints, that might be the best London game matchup we've seen ever. I feel like the London games are all like Jets, Falcons last year. Jaguars always are in them. I think there was a good one between the Chargers and the Titans like 6 years ago, where it was won on like a last second touchdown or 2-point conversion by like Mike Williams. I could be wrong in saying that, but a London game is definitely something to look forward to.
Yeah, naturally exciting one. Seeing if the Vikings can, not the Vikings, they won, but kind of more bounce back from show the form that they had in week 1. That's what I'm hoping for, at least. Again, Justin Jefferson. I know some people that drafted him very high. His ADP was very high. Looked at to be the best wide receiver going into this season. Only catching, I think, was three catches for 12 yards in that last game.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not it was the defense or just Kirk not finding him, or other guys, specifically KJ Osborne stepping up huge in his quote unquote absence.
Yeah, I think this could be a very big game for the Vikings, especially if Jameis Winston is unable to play and Andy Dalton is starting that game, because it looks like they trust him more as that passing guy. I think if Jameis Winston is out, though, you're going to look at Taysom Hill under center 40% of plays, Andy Dalton 60% of plays. But the Vikings, with a big win over the Packers in week 1, I think, they were riding high on that, and then totally underprepared for the Eagles, lost on Monday Night Football, and then also underprepared for the Lions, got out to an early deficit, were able to come back from that, and hopefully they're able to ride the momentum from that comeback, take it on the plane all the way to London, and, come out strong. I think a big first half for the Vikings is crucial. They might have to do it without Dalvin Cook, but we've seen in the past Alexander Mattison has been able to fill the shoes of him, and maybe without a Dalvin Cook, they're going to pass the ball more, leaning on a guy like Justin Jefferson. Should be a good matchup, though, with Marshawn Lattimore.
Yeah, I think maybe the number one thing to watch in that game might be how Madison plays.
Mm-hmm.
Just if he is big, then there could be concern for Cook and his spot as the starting back on that Vikings team.
Yeah, Dalvin Cook, an incredible talent. He's got all the tools. However, the only tool that he doesn't have is the ability to stay healthy. And, as much as you want to keep, hoping that guys come back healthy and good as ever, and, he's been able to do that, how many injuries does it take to where, you maybe look a different direction? Todd Gurley was one of the greatest running backs in the NFL was poised for one of the greatest careers, but all of a sudden a few injuries and he's out of the league. Obviously, don't want to see that happen to a guy like Dalvin Cook. It's just so unfortunate when you see a guy unable to, just play a full season. Speaking of that kind of thing, I think Christian McCaffrey, new injury on the injury report. He's had one every week, but still suited up. You definitely don't want to see him out of their matchup. But so just hoping for health. There's been a few season-ending injuries already, and just hoping that week 4 can be healthier than the first 3.
Yeah, that definitely. Looking back at week 3, though, kind of getting off the more depressing note, I'd like to just highlight some of my best players of the week. I'll give 2 names for each position that I think would deserve to win the award for best at the position. Offense in general, though, it's Lamar Jackson. Right now, he's the MVP. He's thrown for more than 4 touchdowns in his last 2 weeks. He's rushed, as you said, for over 100 yards. He's doing everything. And it's not just him on that team, though. Mark Andrews last week got 13 targets for 8 catches, 89 yards, and 2 touchdowns with the win. He's been incredible all season. Andrews finally looking to be that consistent, competing for number 1 tight end in the league. And Lamar is definitely helping him. Other QBs that I'd love to mention, though, are Hurts and Josh Allen. Josh Allen in that game throwing for 400 yards and 2 touchdowns. Gets the L, where Hurts threw for 340 yards and got the touchdown, and got 3 touchdowns and got the win. So, personal preference, what you value more, the win and an extra touchdown or 60 extra passing yards. I think I'd give my best QB of last week to Hurts, not counting Lamar, because he might be the best player every single week for the rest of the season at this rate.
Yeah, no, he's been great. And I think it's a good point you make about Mark Andrews and the tight end conversation. I think, I feel like it's consensusly been Travis Kelce for the last however many years I can remember.
At least 5.
And, in that window, the guys who have really, Gronk kind of was on the decline. I feel like he was probably the best tight end before Travis Kelce.
Absolutely.
But the guys you've seen argue that, Darren Waller's had flashes, but this season he's been unimpressive. George Kittle has had flashes, but this season he's been unimpressive.
Well.
So I feel like a guy that hasn't gotten enough credit is Mark Andrews, and, the stats from this season at least show that he is the best tight end in the NFL. I mean, obviously, complete game is something else to take into consideration, but, in terms of a receiving threat, Mark Andrews is that guy, and, I think, he's had one of the best weeks of any offensive player in general.
Yeah, agreed. Another guy, if we're going to talk about tight ends, last week, another guy that just had one of the more impressive performances was it David Njoku of the Browns? Is he on the Browns still?
Yep.
Okay, thank goodness. I would have felt bad. Very talented. I would have felt bad for the Browns if they were to give him up. 10 targets, 9 receptions for 89 yards, same as Andrews, but only 1 touchdown. Weirdly enough, another tight end to get 2 touchdowns was Woods on the Colts, rookie. He got 2 catches, and both were for touchdowns. But Njoku, 89 yards, incredible for performance, but I still have to give my tight end of the week to Mark Andrews, who has been it for the last 3 weeks, probably.
Yeah, and feeding Njoku the ball is Jacoby Brissett. I saw some article saying if Jacoby Brissett keeps playing the way he's playing, will Deshaun even start when he comes back? Which I think is a little crazy.
That is crazy.
But the Browns with a 2-1 record, they got the Falcons coming up. I think, if they have a good record by the time Deshaun's coming back, the plan and the kind of risk and gamble that they made by trading so much and signing Deshaun, I think within by the season's end could look like an incredible move if they're looking like favorites and going into the playoffs with a healthy Deshaun Watson, being the Deshaun Watson that we expect to see.
Yeah, I mean, if they're at least 2 games over 500, 2 to 3 games over 500 by the time Deshaun's back, I would be scared of the Browns going forward, and especially for the playoffs.
And speaking of which, we forgot to mention, hopefully, all prayers for Myles Garrett in
of
a
course.
freak accident. He swerved off the road.
Actually, he's trying to play Sunday.
Yeah, he swerved off the road to miss, to try to avoid an animal. There were wet conditions. He was going a little fast. It was a back road. That's
He's going
expected.
10 over. You'd be lying if you said you didn't go 10 over on back roads.
Yeah, and but yeah, somehow nothing. The car flipped over, and nothing broken or like torn or anything like that. He says he wants to play this Sunday. I think it's a perfect time to play against the Falcons because, that's a game where maybe you can put him on the shelf just so that he's, good for next week. But, everything going out to Myles Garrett, hoping that he's okay. Back to the depressing note, though. Forgot to mention Sterling Shepard, now out for the season.
Torn ACL.
When the injuries pile up, that's when football can, be depressing.
It's the human
That's why they
aspect
only
of football.
play one game a week. It's just because it's such an ask of the human body to, be able to perform at a high level. Hoping a speedy recovery for Sterling Shepard, who was having a great season before, and now looking at the Giants at 2-1, losing one of their bigger weapons. Kenny Galladay's been unimpressive. I think Saquon's going to be leaned on maybe a little too much, and that Giants team might fall apart even with just losing one guy like Shepard.
Yeah, and a team like that was squeaking out wins, you can't afford that. But off the depressing note, hopefully players playing at their peak potential. Actually, because of an injury, David Montgomery going down early in that game.
Khalil Herbert
Had an incredible game. 20 carries for 137 yards, 2 touchdowns, and the Bears picked up the win. It's between him and Patterson, who I mentioned earlier, 141 yards, a touchdown, 17 carries. Those are my picks for running back of the week, both picking up the win. I'd have to go with Khalil Herbert. He steps in huge, and he kind of, for Bears fans, I think, eases the ship a bit. Going forward, and just any tension related to David Montgomery going down, he can now rest properly, come back properly healthy, and I still think they're in great hands.
Yeah, Herbert was great last year. I know there's a lot of Bears fans that even say that he should be the starting running back over David Montgomery. David Montgomery questionable. Somehow he's only day-to-day after leaving the game last week. We'll see whether or not he suits up. But just like Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift, I think Khalil Herbert will be able to pick up right where David Montgomery left off, if not better.
Yeah, we'll see going forward, especially for that Bears team that you said earlier, surprisingly 2-1.
And against the Giants, Giants versus Bears, unless they tie, one of those teams is going to be a 3-1 team.
That is crazy to think about. Other things that are crazy to think about is Hollins being
Matt
Collins being the second best wide receiver fantasy points wise, maybe even statistically. Hollins with 10 targets, 8 receptions, 158 yards, and a touchdown in a losing effort. What an improbable performance. I mean, in week 2, he also was targeted his fair share amount, and I think was the highest scoring fantasy-wise Raiders receiver. But doing it 2 weeks in a row now and putting up 150 yards, is this a guy that we should be looking at? Is this definitely a waiver wire guy to be picking up?
Mm-hmm. And there's so many weapons in that Raiders offense. With Devontae Adams, Darren Waller, and Renfro going down, it was opened up room for him to step up. But I think it's going to be hard for him to get consistent targets over the whole season, but I could be eating my words and, hoping that he's able to keep at the pace that he's going at.
Yeah, and the other wide receiver that I'd love to mention, finally having this big performance was Devonta Smith, who had 2 kind of more quiet games, but finally exploded for 12 targets with 8 receptions and a touchdown and 169 yards in a winning effort. He is my pick just because of the 11 extra yards. Same amount of catches. What a first quarter he had. Oh my goodness. I don't remember exactly what he had in that first quarter, but I know it was over 100 yards.
Yeah, no, he was crazy. Definitely, him and A.J. Brown interchangeable for that number 1 receiver in Philadelphia. Both young. Eagles, they're doing it right.
Oh, absolutely.
Another storyline looking into next week, Zach Wilson, the second overall pick from last year, he's projected to start against the Steelers. Joe Flacco was, very good in his absence,
Elite
fifth in the
Joe
NFL in passing yards. That another case where one close game prevents a team from being 3-0. The Cleveland Browns could easily be 3-0. Their one loss comes to the Jets.
A 1 point loss.
But I'm really excited to see Zach Wilson, especially seeing Trevor Lawrence this year being able to have that good year too. With if Joe Flacco is able to create put up stats with this offense, you got guys like Elijah Moore, Garrett Wilson, Conklin. Tyler Conklin, the tight end from Minnesota. He's been very good.
He's been huge.
And then you got a good two-headed back with Michael Carter and Breece Hall in the backfield. I think the Jets could I don't even know if it's an upset, but they could beat the Steelers for sure. And who knows what they're capable of for the rest of the season. I think just they have so many playmakers on offense. It's going to be a fun team to watch. Hopefully their defense is able to be steady enough. Sauce Gardner has looked great so far.
Yeah, not allowing allowing under 100 passing yards allowed through 3 weeks, and only allowing it's under 6 catches.
Yeah,
which is just incredible so far.
Mm-hmm. A man-to-man specialist. He's that guy that you look for, and then when you come out of the first round with him and Garrett Wilson, I think
it looks like they won the draft.
Last year was a great draft for the New York Jets.
Well, they won that. They're looking really good. For PFF, he was the 5th highest graded rookie at a 71.4. Other guys to mention were Eagles, Jordan Davis. He finished with a 90.2, the only rookie to finish with a 90 PFF
He must have
grading.
had one of those 9 sacks then against Carson Wentz.
Maybe a few of them. But another Jets player to mention is Jermaine Johnson. He ended up with an 86.4 PFF rating. Not sure what his final stats were. I didn't get a look at those. But just an incredible performance from him. Looking at a guy like that, Sauce Gardner moving forward, I think the Jets, not this year, but next year, could be making a huge leap forward. And in 3 years' time, I could see them exactly where the Eagles are right now, where they have a young quarterback who has young options. And once they build up that defense, I could see them being finally a threat to the Bills in that division now.
Yeah, I think the AFC East, it's crazy how it's kind of flipped from what it was. Not to say that the Patriots are a bad team, but it was pretty much the Patriots and nobody else. And now, the other 3 teams are the promising and exciting teams moving into the future. I think Mac Jones, he'll have an okay career, but
yeah, praying that his leg and foot are okay.
I feel like just maybe they have a crazy defense, maybe it's whatever, but I think it's going to be very hard for the New England Patriots to be competitive in the AFC with looking at potentially having to play Miami twice a year, having to play the Bills twice a year, and now that the Jets aren't an easy win anymore, I think the Patriots need to kind of figure out things a little differently and not just rely on 6 division wins every year to help carry their record.
Well, yeah, how crazy is that division becoming? Think about the 4 young quarterbacks they have: Josh Allen, Tua, Mac Jones, and Zach Wilson. Now, who will see what he's capable of. Just that division fills me with so much excitement. I cannot wait to watch all of those matchups moving forward.
I think something that I'm looking at for the NFL right now is, I think in the last 5 years for the NHL, connecting it to one of my favorite sports, kind of for the first time in a while, it was really the young guys who were kind of taking over the lead, the McDavids, the Matthews, the McKinnons, and it wasn't just guys, in their prime, that kind of 27 years old to 32 years old that were running the league. It was these young guys running the league, and we're seeing that in the NFL now too, where, the best quarterbacks aren't, the Brady and the Breeze and the Manning and stuff like that anymore. Now we're looking at Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, these young quarterbacks, and we talk about the young receivers, but it's really exciting to see the future of the NFL.
Yeah, I think as the coaches get smarter and smarter and schemes get better and better, the more explosive players are needed, and that's opened up plenty of opportunity for young players, which I love. I've written down a lot of the rookie performances, so I'll just we've already talked about Olive, Dubes, Wilson, and London. But another wide receiver I'd just like to mention real quick is I think his name's Alec Pierce for the Colts. He finished with 3 catches, but he got 61 yards, and I think it's over 5 targets. If he could keep that up, slowly moving up in the wide receiver depth chart for that Colts team, he could be as another guy that's in those conversations, another rookie.
This rookie class is just impressing, and especially the receivers.
Yeah, and then the running backs as well, a huge week for them. Damian Pierce, Etony, Hall, and Cook. Cook for Buffalo, I think, was the most surprising name I read off because he finished with 3 rushing yards, but combined 40 yards on the day, which was the 4th most for rookie running backs because he had 37 passing yards. But those other guys, Brees, Hall, Etony, and Pierce, all had stellar performances, a combined 70 yards for every single one of them. My pick for the best one would be Damian Pierce because he combined for 101 yards, 80 rushing, and 21 passing with a touchdown. The only rookie running back to get a touchdown, or at least as I could find.
Yeah, and I think there was a quote from the Texans coach just calling Damian Pierce just a fighter, fights for the extra yards and all that, and that's praise that you love to hear from your head coach.
And another thing you love from the head coach is trusting him. Giving him 20 carries with the ball is just, his stock is rising very rapidly, and I think he could be a player in this league for a very long time and a guy that will turn heads.
Absolutely.
But not to discredit guys like Etony and Hall. Etony rushing for 45 yards and passing 30 and receiving 30 yards. And Brees Hall with 39 rushing yards and 53 passing yards. He finished with 92 combined yards, sniffing that 100-yard combined with Damian Pierce. So I think while they're less exciting than the wide receivers, our rookie running backs look incredible this season.
And usually they do take a little bit longer to develop just because, I guess being covered by NFL secondaries versus college secondaries is a completely different thing. But, going from rushing against college, defenses versus NFL defensive lines is a big step up. And, when you look at the 3 names that, the 3 main names, none of those, Jaguars, Texans, or Jets have a crazy offensive line. So, there's a bit of a learning curve, but, impressive showings from all of them.
Yeah, and then the other two names I would love to mention are Hendershot on the Cowboys and Bellinger on the Giants. 2 tight ends, rookies. Didn't catch any touchdown. The only rookie tight end to catch a touchdown would be Woods with his 2. But Hendershot with 3 targets, catches all 3 and gets 43 yards. And Bellinger on the Giants with 5 targets, he catches 4 of them and he puts up 40 yards too. So we're seeing those are 2 names that I personally would be keeping my eye on moving forward as tight ends to look at in the league, and especially as next season rolls around, could be fantasy guys that on more depth heavy rosters could be guys that you see get played.
Absolutely. I think week 3 didn't disappoint, showed us some good games. Looking forward to week 4, and next week we're gonna have NHL starting up, MLB playoffs. NFL season carries along. Still a ways away from the NBA, but I'm sure, as season gets closer, more and more news will come out from that league. But, just a great time to be a sports fan.
Oh, yeah. Nothing not to look forward to. As our preseasons wrap up and our regular seasons get going, baseball enters its postseason. Great time to be a sports fan.
Exactly. For me, not as familiar with baseball, so don't feel as comfortable throwing money on baseball games, but once the NFL, NHL, and NBA are all back ramped up, a lot more games to bet on too.
Oh, exactly. Now with betting becoming legal in Ontario, and it's exciting. If I were to bet on a team right now on the spot to win the World Series, give me the Mets.
Give me the Mets?
That's my pick right now. You can never not trust Max Scherzer. That's at least what I think. He won it in 2019 through injuries, came in relief in Game 7, I'm pretty sure. I just love what their roster's doing right now. And while they might not be as hot as they were at some points in the season, their hitting is so good. And it feels right. It feels like it's time.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see it. MLB playoffs. I think, we'll get more of our attention once they get underway. Playoff baseball, it just has a different atmosphere from regular season.
Yeah, especially September baseball, where as our playoffs are more set in stone. The only really headline-worthy thing is what Judge is doing.
Yeah, Judge Watch.
Yeah, Judge Watch. At 60 right now, the record...
One away from the record.
Yeah, one away from the American League record. So, it's the only thing to look at right now, but as the playoffs roll around, there'll be definitely more to talk about. But for now, that's about what we have for you today.
Yeah, we hope you enjoyed listening to this edition, and we'll hope to see you for the next edition.